The Prime Minister, as you can see, has been received by, received at the Philadelphia airport there. He's deplaned, he's emerged out of the plane. He's now headed straight to Wilmington. So the Prime Minister there in US, his first visit to the US after taking oath for the third time as a Prime Minister. A power-packed visit, and these are live pictures coming in from Philadelphia. Yes, Vishnu, go ahead.
No, so, live pictures of the Prime Minister arriving. It's just a 3-day visit, but heavens, he's got it really packed this time around in terms of his priorities. He's going to be coming to this hotel where I am right now. The reason I'm not out on the road is that I can see by looking out the window is the Secret Service have this entire area completely covered, so road access not possible. He's going to be here for a little while before he moves to the residence of President Joe Biden. I would hope to be there as well to sort of get a chance to see the two leaders greet each other before they head off for the bilateral meetings. And then, of course, there will be the Quad Summit, which takes place as well. But, I'd spoken to you about the cancer moonshot. I'd spoken to you about semiconductor technology. Let's talk about climate change, which you have referred to. I think a lot of what India is looking for from the United States is the transfer of state-of-the-art technology, which makes the transition to green energy, green technology is so much easier for India. It's a primary concern among nations of the South, and India has repeatedly said that, look, in as much as we make our own efforts, whether it's with green hydrogen or new technology when it comes to batteries, the transfer of technology, which is often proprietary technology, which enables industries to make that change towards a green transition, is very, very costly. And India, as a leader of the global South, has spoken for nations of the South around the world, saying that, a mechanism has to be found whereby there is more equitable transfer of this technology. And the question of who pays for this, who pays for the present state of pollution around the world, who pays for the technology which goes to countries in the South which have not polluted as much as, for example, the United States, is something which must be addressed. So that's an ongoing area of conversation between both sides. And as one other important aspect of Indian foreign policy has been the expansion of the United Nations Security Council. That's going to come up certainly in the Futures Conference, which the Prime Minister will be addressing in New York at the United Nations General Assembly. It's not the UNJ or the United Nations General Assembly session. That's what Foreign Minister Jaishankar will be addressing, but the Prime Minister will be addressing the Futures Conference, where he will be speaking, as I understand, on the importance of expanding the Security Council. India has pointed out, A, we are a nuclear power. B, we are the world's largest democracy. C, we've got support from so many of the leading nations of the world, many of them permanent members of the Security Council, towards an expansion of the UN Security Council. And it's not enough for there to potentially be a Chinese veto on that process, that the entire reality of the United Nations needs to change to reflect changing realities in the world. And certainly India deserves to be there, not least of all because of our massive economy, because of the fact that we are the world's fastest growing large economy. And that is significant. We are the most populous nation on the earth. So on what basis is India being left out of the United Nations Security Council, which has been constructed, which is a construct which is several decades old, while it holds incredible importance in geopolitical international affairs, it does need to grow. And so that's something which the Prime Minister will once again be addressing at the United Nations, at the Conference of the Futures. We face an incredible threat of terrorism. The United States faces a concern of terrorism. I expect that discourse on terrorism to come up in various forums. For example, over here in that bilateral conversation, India would talk about extremist threats from Khalistani organizations, some of whom operate in Canada and the United States. We talk about the threat we face from countries such as Pakistan. The United States is well aware of the threat of extremism, and India makes the point that there cannot be double standards on this. A terrorist threat is a terrorist threat. It comes in different ways, shapes and forms, but it is something which challenges the stability of nations, and therefore India is uncompromising as far as the threat of terrorism is concerned, and that's something that's likely to come up once again as India seeks justice from the attacks that we have suffered, what we face in terms of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. Vedant, I've tried to identify several areas which are of importance, which in a sense summarize the relationship between India and the United States. But again, since we are also talking about the Quad, these are all issues which bind the Quad as well.
And let me bring in our guests this evening, Vishnu. Ashok Sajjanhar is with us. Ambassador Sajjanhar, from an India point of view, what are some of the key aspects you'll be looking at?
As far as the Quad is concerned, the agenda is quite clear as to what the two sides are going to discuss. Basically, I think, since the first summit of the Quad was organized in a virtual format, in March 21, and after that, 4 in-person Quad summits have taken place. The agenda has grown. We started with the critical and emergent technologies. We started with the COVID-19 vaccines. We started with climate change. But today, it's a whole new game, whether it is the humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, it is infrastructure financing, it's connectivity, it's education, it's healthcare. So all these issues are definitely will come up. And of course, the fact that all the Quad countries want a free and open Indo-Pacific, they want freedom of navigation, they want freedom of overflights. In addition to that, Vedant, what I would like to mention here is that I have observed, from India, from the vantage point of India, Prime Minister Modi was in Singapore, he was in Brunei recently. We also had the visits of the Prime Ministers of Malaysia and Vietnam to India. The acceptance of the Quad and of the Indo-Pacific amongst the ASEAN countries is growing. And I think that is a very good
Sure.
indication, because initially when the Quad came up, there was this sense of wariness that, maybe these countries are out there for some, destabilization or militarization of the area. But I think what we have been able to do is, as Prime Minister Modi said in Hiroshima, in Tokyo in 2022, that force is, Quad is a force for global good. And that is what we are trying to project, that the decisions that are taken, that all on these agenda items, there should be benefits that should accrue to the members of the Indo-Pacific. So this is
I
as
think
far
that's
as the
an important point you're making there, Ambassador Sajjanhar. Inina Zuckerman come in on this because defense and security are such crucial aspects of the entire relationship between India and the US, and indeed, the larger agenda as far as the Quad Summit is concerned as well, whether it's maritime security, whether it's the Indo-Pacific strategy. The partners of the Quad are really looking at emerging technologies, making sure that our defense supply chains, we're self-reliant when it comes to those, and, sort of looking at furthering those, that aspect, and strengthening our, defense supply chains as well. From a security point of view, how do you see this visit?
Well, thank you so much. There's so much to discuss. And actually, even commercial sectors could, in some ways, be seen part of the security discussions. But maritime security in particular is going to be big on the agenda. There's already a number of ongoing projects which cannot be enhanced in light of the recent developments, particularly in the Indian Ocean, logistics centers, the agreement for U.S. Navy to use Indian ports for logistic purposes, and cooperation agreements related to increasing and enhancing maritime security against common threats which have emerged in the past, the past year, and have challenged both of these countries. There's the idea of combined maritime forces, because it's not only the Quad that is the nature of US-India agreement. It's also the CMF, Combined Maritime Forces. India's full membership is expected to increase interoperability between these two bodies, and of course, defense sales. US has already sold India a variety of military equipment, transport and maritime aircraft, helicopters, anti-ship missiles, howitzers. That is expected to be continued as a point of discussion to continue increase this important trade, as India is looking to diversify and increase and improve its military capabilities, eventually becoming defense independent. It's gravitating towards some of the cutting edge Western technologies and diversifying its arsenal of weapons from France, and now increasingly from the United States, which is really a breakthrough moment. And of course, there's a big project on with a report and recommendations to improve security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific bilaterally and not just
Point
by
you're
means of
making. All
the
right.
Quad.
Irina, hold on to your thoughts because these are live pictures coming in. Members of the Indian diaspora really rolling out the red carpet in a sense for Prime Minister Modi. Of course, the Diaspora Connect is so palpable when it comes to the Prime Minister's visit, particularly to the US. So a lot of members of the Indian diaspora, Indian Americans present there at the Philadelphia airport to welcome the Prime Minister. A lot of excitement, color, anticipation. Of course, we all remember Howdy Modi of 2019. And then over the years, we have seen this sort of diaspora connect with members of the Indian diaspora with Indian flags. And it's not just about Prime Minister Modi, perhaps, but also, India and the US. Over the years, how we've evolved as bilateral partners, I think that is also a story to really be looked at. But the Prime Minister has arrived there in Philadelphia and he's received this rousing welcome from members of the Indian diaspora. But Zenia Behel come in on this. While, of course, we look at these pictures of the Indian diaspora welcoming the Prime Minister, initially, of course, there was this sort of skepticism about what the Biden years would look like for India. But we have seen in the past couple of years that they've proven to be more constructive, perhaps, than ever before, because we've seen a lot of business being done. And even in terms of the optics, India and US have grown closer and more so than ever before.
I'm unable to hear the anchor.
All right, we'll try and fix that audio line with you, Zenia Behel. But Ambassador Sajjanhar, if you would like to weigh in on this aspect, initially that sort of cynicism about what these Biden years would look like for India, but we've really come a long way as far as our relationship with the US is concerned.
Oh, absolutely, Vedant. Thank you very much for that question. When Mr. Biden came, there was this apprehension that when Trump had come, he had done away with all the initiatives of the Biden era, of the Obama era, sorry. Not only domestically, whether it is the Obama healthcare or, but, even on the external front, whether it is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, whether it is the Paris Accord. So it was thought that maybe Mr. Biden might also do, something similar. But it has not happened, particularly as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, as far as the Quad is concerned, as far as withdrawal from Afghanistan is concerned. These are all aspects that were started by Trump. Of course, exiting Afghanistan was not something that was in our interest. But, once the United States had exited Afghanistan, the utility of Pakistan had come down very significantly. And we had seen how Trump had dealt with Pakistan. So we've seen during the Biden era also, the Quad, we saw the first summit taking place, as I mentioned, March, the first virtual summit, the first in-person summit took place in September of 2021, just within a few months of Biden assuming power. And then on the bilateral front, whether it was the visit of the Prime Minister last year, the state visit of the Prime Minister, which is a great honor. Also, in terms of the launch of the initiative for critical and emerging technologies, also in many of the defense agreements had been signed during the Trump era, but actually implementing them, putting them into on the road, whether it is the GE 414 engine or it is the semiconductor, collaboration between the two sides, the decision by Micron to put in $850 million, also another investment of $2.75 billion. So, there is the relationship has really progressed very high. The manner in which India received
Irina, on this, Ambassador Sajjanhar, would you then believe that even if there is a change of guard, of course, whether it's President Trump who takes over or Kamala Harris, this relationship will only grow from here, given the fact that there's fertile ground, there's enough to sort of collaborate on. It's almost like a symbiotic relationship. India needs the US, but US also needs India for so many avenues and so many sort of aspects. So despite a change in administration, do you see this relationship being stable going forward?
Yeah, Vedant, again, an excellent question. I think irrespective of the changes that have taken place in the White House over the last 25 years, since Clinton came to India in March 2000, we have seen the relationship grow. So irrespective of which, candidate is successful, whether it is Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, I am quite convinced that the relationship will continue to grow. There will be, of course, a change of style. There will be a little bit of change of substance because, as we have seen, Mr. Trump is very much focused on trade deficits, trade relations, and he has spoken about that also, calling India a trade abuser, etc. But I think we'll have to work out on that. And with Kamala Harris, there might be some other issues on, social aspects of the so-called backsliding of democracy or treatment of the minorities, etc., etc. So there might be a few differences in style, but otherwise, I think at the macro level, in the overall context, the relationship is bound to grow. And we have set such a template now
Yes.
that, the only way that the relationship can change is grow further, expand further, and deepen further. Vedant.
All right, Ambassador Sajanhar, thanks very much for that perspective. Stay on with us. In fact, before I slip into a short break, a quick word from you, Professor Behl, since we couldn't speak earlier. What's the sentiment there in the US as far as the Prime Minister's visit is concerned? Whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, it's such an interesting time actually in the US. But one thing that both the presidential candidates agree on is that India is a strong and important partner for the West and for the US.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that both the candidates have agreed upon. That's something that former presidents and former presidential candidates have agreed upon. Let's not forget, Obama had declared India a very important strategic partner, right? And of course, under current Republican nominee and former President Donald Trump, way back in 2016, India was placed under the Strategic Trade Authorization Level 1, which is typically a category for technology release on par with its NATO allies. And that's really big for India, right? To encourage trade, to encourage more strategic partnership, to encourage military partnership, maritime security, which is, again, a goal of Quad. And one thing I'd like to point out with this specific summit, which is categorically a farewell summit for President Biden, the last one he will do in his official capacity as the commander-in-chief of my country. One thing to specifically point out is India is one of the largest manufacturers of vaccines in the world. And this initiative is a moonshot initiative specifically for cervical cancer and vaccines, right? HPV, human papillomavirus
and I think that vaccine diplomacy is so critical to the relationship between India and the US. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Professor Behl, but stay on with us. We'll continue to track this story and all those live pictures coming in. But we have to slip to a short break. We'll be right back with more.
Hello, Moto.
Welcome back. The big story we are tracking very closely on NDTV at this hour, our non-stop coverage of the Prime Minister's crucial 3-day visit to the US. Well, Prime Minister Modi has landed in Philadelphia. A lot of excitement and anticipation there with members of the Indian diaspora welcoming the Prime Minister at the Philadelphia airport. He is headed straight to Wilmington, where he will, of course, have that crucial bilateral meeting with President Joe Biden. And it's for the first time that President Biden is actually hosting Prime Minister Modi at his home in Wilmington. So, in a sense, symbolic of the closeness between the two world leaders. But a lot is on agenda, a lot to unpack. And joining me on the show this evening, well, Professor Zinia Behl, who is a professor and political analyst at the Cleveland State University in Ohio. Also, Irina Zuckerman, U.S. National Security Analyst. Ambassador Sajjan Har will also be with us shortly. But Professor Zainab, I'll go ahead. I had to interrupt you there. But you were talking about, the vaccine diplomacy and, a lot on agenda, from the India-U.S. drug framework to, of course, harder issues, as it were, like defense, security, maritime security, and the larger Indo-Pacific strategy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about Indo-Pacific strategy, and what I was touching upon was with this specific initiative, it's being called the Moonshot Initiative, right? And a focus of this initiative is cervical cancer. And we need to realize one of the key causes that has been reported, of course, by the New York Times of cervical cancer is HPV, the human papilloma virus. And while Australia has the goal to eliminate cervical cancer caused by HPV. This is a big opportunity for India, right, as one of the global manufacturers and one of the biggest manufacturers of vaccines in the world, to become that hub for specific vaccines targeting those diseases, those specific diseases impacting a lot of developed countries, right? Women in a lot of developed countries. There is that aspect to this relationship. And of course, trade in general. When you look at the US-China relations, some experts argue that it's beyond salvation, right? But again, China cannot be ignored as the manufacturing power of the world. And with the Quad Summit, one of the goals of the Quad Summit has been to shift that focus from China and move it to India, move it to other countries around the world, and increase that partnership. So that's going to be discussed. Technology will be a big focus. AI is a big focus of this specific summit, right? When we talk about jobs, when we talk about the boom within the IT sector in India, when we talk about supporting the developed economies of the world, this is a big opportunity for India, even in that regard. Right, going back to what Geeta Gopinath, who is the deputy director, right, at IMF, who talked about sustainable AI and how AI is going to impact, right, the labor force in the coming years. When we talk about that, all these are opportunities for India, right? Or because India has skilled labor, India has a growing young population.
India,
So
and
strategic
Irina, come in
partnerships
on
will
this.
benefit India.
Irina, come in on this, because reverse migration is also very much a reality, and that's such an interesting conversation to have, given the fact that there are a lot of Indian American IT professionals, for example, who are now looking at avenues back home here in India. So how do you see that? And in that context, where does the American dream really stand when it comes to Indian Americans? Because we've seen that you've had business leaders, etc., within the US talk about how there are growing opportunities for even Americans in India.
I definitely think it's very much true. Recently, there's been several major US companies looking to make investments in India. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's in full coordination with the official US government policy to increase technological IT cooperation with India, in part vis-a-vis China, but also on its own merits. That includes cybersecurity, that includes AI, that includes, of course, chips manufacturing, but also all sorts of other IT sectors. And I think this is where there is a convergence of these interests that will allow everyone to have a little bit of what they want. The reverse migration trend can benefit the US because you have US educated, trained professionals who understand the US business climate, but who also can navigate personal relationships and business climate in India and take up some of those jobs that benefit both the US business sector and India's economy as well, and serve as a diplomatic people to people bridge between the communities. And I think that's something very positive. But I also think that the reverse migration trend does not mean the end of Indian presence in the US. I think we can expect actually more interest among Indian professionals to come to US for working visits, exchanges, professional exchanges, educational opportunities. And I think this is going to be kind of a very dynamic process and relationship of Indian educators and students and professionals coming traveling back and forth and building stronger and stronger bridges and creating a more holistic and a more integrated relationship in that way.
That's an interesting point you're making. But before I bring in Professor Behel and also the Ambassador Sajjan Har, let's take a look at this ground report that my colleague Vishnu Shom sent us from Wilmington. Take a look.
Hello and welcome. We continue with our coverage of the visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States just a couple of hours before the Prime Minister comes over here. There's a huge sense of anticipation. We've got a lot of smiling faces. Sir, smile, sir. You were smiling all this time. And so we'll just get a word in from a lot of these very, very respected members of the local community over here. What's your name, sir?
Jeet Joshi.
And where do you work or what do you do?
I'm a physician here in Delaware and from Gujarat originally.
Yeah.
So very excited.
What is your specialization in medicine?
I'm a psychiatrist.
Right.
So,
are you looking forward to this visit?
Absolutely. This is very, very cool. It's a great opportunity. Very excited.
Yeah?
Yep, absolutely.
How about you, ma'am? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My husband is a doctor. The two sons are mine. Both of them are doctors, and I'm very proud of.
So it's a full family of doctors. So in case we fall unwell, Pooja, we can look after that headache of yours. But looking forward to this visit.
Sure.
I'm sure you must be as well.
Yes, we are.
Tell
Yes.
us your name, sir.
My name is Piyush.
Ganesh Balu, local physician.
Right. So we've got a lot of doctors. Are you all from Gujarat or across India, or primarily the Gujarati community here? What's your name?
Preet Joshi. I'm also from Gujarat as well. Super excited. Never thought we would be able to meet him.
As well,
I am a doctor.
Yeah, so no prizes for guessing that. But what does this visit mean for you?
I mean, I think it's something that we would have never had a chance to get this encounter, and so we're super excited to have this communities. Yes, of course.
As you know, India is doing incredibly well for. In the test match against Bangladesh. Do you people follow cricket as well over here? I mean, no matter where I travel around the world, so we are going to be winning that. So you can put that up one more time before camera also. It's the Dream 11 India, and India doing so well in cricket, but then in test match cricket, for cricket aficionados, I know the difference. But tell me a little bit about yourself. So
I am Dr. Dilip Joshi. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm father of this Joshis.
The whole family of doctors. How about you?
I'm Anand Swaminathan. I'm not a Gujarati, my wife is.
And what do you do?
So I'm a software consultant.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. In terms of software consultancy, on the one hand, Indian professionals like you have done so well over here, but there is a sense now that many want to go back to India. So do you see that reverse migration happening?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are a lot more opportunities, and I think
Why don't you come next to me? The light is
Sure,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot more opportunities in India, and it's a growing economy. A lot more people still below the poverty line. So there are a lot of opportunities for software development, and there are a lot of startups that are coming so fast in India. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. I think
तो मतलब आप जो कह रहे हैं कि रिवर्स माइग्रेशन हो रहा है यहाँ से?
Absolutely हो रहा है, because वहाँ पे projects इतने अच्छे से चल रहे हैं. So there's absolutely no question about people going back and looking towards startup.
और आप यहाँ कितने साल के लिए रह चुके हैं?
यहाँ पे मैं 24 साल से हूँ.
24 साल. और आपको कभी लगता नहीं है कि वापस इंडिया जाए?
अभी तक तो लगता नहीं है, but we will plan half and half maybe.
But tell me about the IT industry, and reverse migration. इसके बारे में बताइए. IT industry में US से इंडिया काफी reverse migration शायद हो रहा है. इसके तो आपका विचार क्या है इसमें?
I think there are two things. We get very talented software engineers from India. But then in the US, we have a limitation on how quickly they can get their green cards and things like that. हाँ, उनको green card वगैरह करने में बहुत time लगता है. So a lot of people, they spend 6 years and then go back because they find very good opportunities. And once they get some good experience in the US, they're able to really fly really well in the Indian industry. तो वहाँ पे मतलब, so there are people who would like to go back. And of course, our roots are roots,
All right. Well, there you have it. So many members of the community over here looking forward to the visit of the Prime Minister. Just the sense of being close to Prime Minister Modi is something which they're clearly excited about. It's back to the studio.
All right, so very interesting there. Members of the Indian diaspora talking to my colleague Vishnu Shom. But let me bring in my guests back. Professor Zenia Behel continues to be with us, and also Irina Sukerman. So, Professor Behel, while of course there are these larger issues of security,
unfortunately,
defense,
I cannot hear the anchor.
to be looked at. All right, we'll try and fix that line with you. I request my producers to please look at it urgently. But Irina Zuckerman, weigh in on this. While, of course, we discuss the larger issues of, security, defense, the Indo-Pacific strategy, maritime security, etc., why should an ordinary Indian worry about or, sort of look at this visit by the Prime Minister? What's in it for an ordinary Indian citizen, given the fact that last time around, of course, the big push was that of the semiconductor plant that will be set up in India, so that will in turn consequently create more jobs for ordinary folks. So, how do you look at that aspect? Why should somebody in the US, why should Indian Americans, why should Indians here look at this visit, and what is for them to take away? Irina, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Actually, there's a number of projects that affect both the local communities and the country-to-country relations. Some of the healthcare projects, some of the technological exchanges, they benefit people both back home and there. But specifically, the issue about the green card issue, in my opinion, is resolvable in terms of U.S. needs. U.S. Recently acknowledged having a big skills gap in among professionals in the engineering industry, in the chip design industry, and this is something that India amply has. And I think encouraging this sort of a expedited green card visa for professionals in those industries and of course their families could be the start of a process that facilitates the entry of Indian professionals into the US and also has them more integrated into the workforce here. And that, of course, strengthens the local Indian diaspora in the United States. More professionals coming means the growth of opportunities for diaspora in various sectors, even medical sector, accommodating the needs of growing communities and educators and people opening restaurants and small businesses and medium-sized businesses. All of that benefits from a healthy migration flow and from resolving this migration issue as well.
That's an interesting point you're making there. In fact, Dr. Tara Karta, former director of the National Security Council Secretariat, is also with us. Thanks very much, Dr. Karta, for being with us. Right at the top, how do you see this visit of the Prime Ministers? Of course, a lot is on agenda, the crucial bilateral with Biden and then the Quad Summit. How important do you think that is, given the fact that, of course, there are many challenges when it comes to, larger issues of security, when it comes to India's presence in the Indo-Pacific with the growing Chinese footprint. So do you see that Quad Summit extremely relevant and well-timed?
Actually, I mean, in the sense, President Biden has been, a fairly good friend to us in many ways. He's on his way out. And in terms of the Quad, I think Modi is the only person who is continuing because the Japanese Prime Minister is, that's a different issue, however. But in this instance, the point is, we are definitely, this is one economy which is growing and is growing well. And that is what makes it important. I would love that. Modi is a huge crowd puller. That's a given, right? He is somebody people like to meet and greet. But the basic fact is you have an economy where people want to invest. They're interested in how India is growing. That's one. Second is how you've positioned yourself in this whole Russia-Ukraine thing. That is also an important thing. Because if it does seem to me in the last, say maybe a month or so, that this has picked up. So it's at a very particular time that if this thing goes forward, it will go forward very quietly with probably not in the headlines at all in the next few months, but I think it will go forward. That's important. And overall, it's the next term of Mr. Modi. He's going to be there for a long time now. So both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, we are okay with both. And I think this visit is a signal also that, we are okay with the Biden administration. You've shifted the Quad summit. You've given away the summit to Washington. So you're signaling you're good with the Biden administration, you're good with the Trump administration. Whatever works for us, we are okay with either.
That's a very important point you're making, that the Prime Minister is equally close to former President Trump. Of course, Kamala Harris is a person of Indian origin, so there is that aspect to look at as well. And of course, the Prime Minister's camaraderie with President Biden is something that is well known. But while, of course, we discuss the positives of the relationship, the fact that the relationship is really transformed in the past 10 years, we have seen that a lot of work has been done, a lot of business has been done between India and US in the past 4 years, particularly in the Biden years. But there are challenges as well, Dr. Karta, particularly, the entire Khalistan issue. I mean, right ahead of the Prime Minister's visit, there was news of the White House hosting some pro-Khalistan leaders, though, of course, that's one issue that India and US have vowed to discuss across the table. But how do you see that, in a sense, as a challenge when it comes to the otherwise positive relationship between India and the US?
See, in any relationship, even I would defy anyone on this panel to say they have perfect relationships with everybody. In any relationship, there's going to be a fracas. There's going to be rough edges. Having said that, the Panun controversy is extremely unfortunate. I mean, he's made this case, he's timed it specifically to cause trouble, right? Because that's what it's all about. That's what he's done all the time. Now, the court has issued a summons. That is standard practice. If you accuse XYZ of a crime, yes, people are summoned. So it's not, it's not that big a deal. It's something Panun has done. And I don't think we should give him that kind of coverage that he is clearly looking for. Other than that, there are other far more serious issues between US and India. On the good side, of course, is the fact they are one of the few countries, major countries with which you have a favorable trade. Right, it's not in like China. That's the good part. The bad, the sad part, I would say, I wouldn't say it's bad, is that things like the GE engine deal has to still fructify. That's a very serious thing for us. And hopefully the Predator drone deal will go through in this visit. I mean, one hopes that it will go through because the DSC committee, I think, gave its clearance in July. So I don't see, I think CCS has also given, CCS has given its clearance. So let's see how this goes.
All right. All right. Thanks very much, Dr. Tara Karta, Professor Zinia Behel, and Irina Zuckerman for being with us and, decoding all those aspects for us, because there is a lot to unpack. There is so much on agenda. First, of course, a crucial bilateral meeting. That is the focus tonight. It will take place at about 9:30 India time. So that's going to be crucial. The Prime Minister is headed to Wilmington, to President Biden's residence, after which the Quad summit as well. So a lot on agenda, and this will remain our top focus on NDTV.